This is a Blairing Out with Eric Blair show. And today I'm delighted to have John Waite, solo artist, member of the Babies, and Bad English. How you doing today, John?
I'm well, Eric. How are you?
Excellent. What was it like for you to grow up in Lancaster, England?
Pretty working class background, really. It was a small town. It's got a castle, an art school, university. Pretty good town, actually. Very blue collar, but sort of very arty.
Your dad was a mechanic.
Yeah, Mum was a nurse.
Now, and you watched TV when you were younger.
Yeah, I tell you what, my earliest recollection of music is watching the test card in the afternoon. They used to show the test card from like 2 o'clock to about 5 and play music. And they would have this one piece of music that they would play that sounded like rock and roll. And me and my brother used to wait for this song to come around for hours. We'd just be sat in front of the TV, the test card, waiting for this one piece of music. And that's my earliest recollection of being like a music fan.
You were in high school?
Yeah.
And what was your interaction?
Junior school.
What was it called?
Junior school.
Junior school.
Yeah.
What was your interaction like with some of the other kids there in school, or some of the teenagers?
Well, I was pretty popular, I think. I mean, I was a pretty different kid. I had long hair when it wasn't really a lot of kids with long hair and stuff. And but it's in that working class background, you get a lot of kids are pretty straight up, you know, they're pretty friendly. You don't get a lot of weirdness that you might get in sort of more of a moneyed environment. Working class kids tend to just get on together.
Yeah, it's say what you mean and mean what you say.
Yeah, it's pretty much like, you know, the humour that you get from coming from the Northwest is always very dry and probably a self-defense mechanism. But I mean, it's very, very dry humour and people laugh a lot. Probably because life's so hard, you know.
Yeah, you have to laugh when life is hard.
Especially.
Exactly. I know all about it. How did you get your first guitar?
Well, actually, it cost £7. It was my brother was in a band. And the bass player bought a Fender Precision, and he'd made this other guitar, a Hofner guitar, and he sold me that for £7. So, at the age of 15, I had a bass guitar.
And how much did you practice?
All the time. I mean, they say that Paul McCartney used to play the guitar in the toilet, but I did all that, plus wake up with the guitar in bed with me. I mean, you just never leave the guitar, you take it everywhere, you know. Couldn't be separated from the guitar at all. That's pretty bad, isn't it? That's pretty
I
obsessive.
was the same way. I had a bass. I
wound up going to art school and playing in art school bands and stuff like that. That was my introduction to rock and roll. We had like regional TV programs, and I saw the Beatles' first performance ever, actually. I saw that on Scene at 6:30, which is a regional TV show. Mm-hmm. But we didn't really have rock and roll like MTV and rock radio. It was before that. So we had Radio Luxembourg coming in from the continent, and we'd listen to that at night. There was no real scene. And being a kid, we sort of grabbed at anything that did look like rock and roll. And the Beatles were like the first thing that really broke through.
Did you see rock and roll as a way out?
Yeah, I did. I thought, I was at art school for 4 years. I got a diploma. I was going to be a painter. But my first love really was music. And the more I got into it, the more gigs I played, and the more I sort of started leaving Lancaster and playing gigs in next towns and stuff like that, and wound up in London. You know, it only took about 6 months to leave Lancaster for good. Yeah, when I was 18, I couldn't imagine not being in a band. I thought if I didn't sort of wind up making records, I'd wind up in jail because I had too much energy. So I thought if I couldn't do what I really wanted to do, I'd probably wind up in trouble.
Speaking of trouble, you were accused of being a jewel thief.
Oh yeah, well I left.
That's a little bit down the road.
Yeah, well actually it was about 2 years later, but I actually got confronted by the police. Because bands were unusual then. You know, if you were in a band, it was unusual. And the police didn't like it because it was all sort of part of the counterculture thing. So they were breathing down our neck. And I think they tried to sort of intimidate me a bit.
Yeah.
So I just left town.
And so you lived in London? You actually
Yeah.
took up residence there?
I was like in a 3-piece rock band called England.
Yeah.
We used to play the Marquee Club on Water Street. And we lived in this tiny 12 by 10 room in West Hampstead, and we used the PA as furniture. And I mean, I weighed about 90 pounds at that point. I was we just weren't eating properly and stuff. It was a case of really doing something you love to do, but making zero money. But it was like a labour of love, really, you know.
Yeah, and you're paying your dues.
Well, yeah, first of many, really. I actually ended up in America. I came to America about 2 years after that, and joined a band in Cleveland for like 4 months.
Was that the Boys?
The Boys.
Now I heard the Boys were like this pop punk?
Well, there's two versions of what was going on with the Boys. I think people mistake the Boys for a different band, but this was like a local Cleveland band that was like based on sort of Mott the Hoople and sort of more like a blues sound. But I think there's confusion about who the Boys were. Then I went back to England and started the Babies.
So it's rumored that Ringo Starr funded your first... Okay, that's not true.
No, the engineer was called Ringo on the first album. We put like, thanks to Ringo. And everybody thought we were sort of in with the Beatles, you know.
So how did you fund that epic 5-song?
Well, no. Well, that was our demo tape. We made a video tape of us playing live, and that goes at a record deal. That signed to Chrysalis. And then we made the album with Bob Ezrin in Canada.
What was it like working with Bob?
It was, you know, it was a beginning.
Your music wasn't being accepted in England.
Well, it was a very tight sort of business, and it was very hard to get signed in England. When we finally did get signed, we got a huge deal. And there was a lot of resentment about that. We'd paid a lot of dues before we got the deal, but the fact that we were launched at such a velocity, it was like, and here it is, the next big thing. And the English have this thing where they'll let you get big and then they sort of knock you off, you know? And that was starting to happen. We got really, really bad reviews all the time. And it was just a waste, you know? We'd see bands that were nowhere near as good as the Babies getting this sort of like 5-star review. And America was like the Big Apple, not just New York. If you could make it in America, you would make it around the world. So we toured England as much as we could and then just split for LA. And we're based here and just went on tour from LA. And then we started to have hits in Europe. So we did it backwards, really.
When Mike Corby left the Babies, where did you find Jonathan Cain and Ricky Phillips to replace him?
They just came in a slew of auditions. We were down the street at SIR and we just threw the doors open and said, if you could play the keyboards or play bass, come down. And through word of mouth on the street, we just asked who could do the job. We got real lucky real quickly. We took about a month to find the guys, but John came back a couple of times and it was just more right every time he came back. And Ricky lived in the neighborhood and was working at a guitar store across the street and heard about the job and just walked over. So it was just, it fell into place, but they had to kind of, I think it worked taking a month to have them come back a couple of times because they went and listened to the records. And our influences were so English that it gave them time to sort of like see us for what we were trying to get to on the next step, you know. We wanted to move forward and we obviously did, but I think it really helped. The energy was always really what drove the Babies forward. It was as if with Tony and Wally and me playing bass, I'd just shout G and Tony would count something in, we'd play something in G and I'd start singing and we'd get a song. It was like we were so in tune. So that was that's hard company to fit into.
The Head First album.
Yeah, but that was a good one. We finished that as a 3-piece band, so it was remarkable that it even got finished, because that's when Mike left in the middle of that. But we actually wrote Head First and Love Don't Prove I'm Right, and the big songs from that record were written in like a week and recorded the next week, and then it came out, you know.
That's amazing.
But that's how good the Babies were, you know.
Well, not only that, the album has such a big sound for a 3-piece.
Yeah, but I mean, we spent a fortune making it sound big, and then we only had like 10 grand to finish it, go back and recut some songs. And we did it like in a tiny studio.
Is that the one Nevison produced?
Yeah, but we'd run out, after it was finished, it didn't have the hits or anything on it. So we went back in for a week and recut all these songs, new songs. We'd put the drum kit in a small room, cut it, that was good enough, you know. Head First was cut in like a room about as big as a toilet. Well, but it sounds gigantic.
Yeah,
you know?
well, it's always about, that's the genius of music. It's always about getting that sound of the real McCoy.
But the real McCoy was Tony, though. The drummer was always like playing the drums like it was his last day on earth.
Oh, well, Tony Brock.
Tony Brock. So we always played like that. So I think if you recorded it with a Walkman mic, it would still sound huge.
Punchy.
Tony. Yeah, because Tony played the drums like it was gangbusters.
Yeah, you know, the last time I saw him, he was playing with Bernie Taupin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was doing a small little tour with Bernie Taupin
the
around.
Farm Dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see him.
I haven't seen that yet.
There he is. Do you keep in touch with them?
I haven't seen them for like 5-6 years. We've just gone off in different directions, you know.
I know, it's like having friends. It's like you have something in common for a while, and then it's kind of like when that thing isn't in common, you kind of drift apart.
Well, it's very intense being in a group with people, you know. You spend 7 years together, and you just, in the end, want to go off and get married or have a family or do something else. And for 7 years, for guys to be in in the same room, on the same stage, in the same bus, aeroplane, whatever, going to a gig. It's a lot. It's like 3 or 4 lifetimes in one, you know?
Yeah.
So after 7 years, you've really seen a lot of stuff. You've seen a lot of each other.
And you get sick of each other.
Yes.
Exactly. In essence.
No, little things mean a lot after 7 years, but I mean, I love those guys. They were great, you know?
Jesus, Are You There?
Yeah.
What inspired that song?
Well, it was originally called Jesus Isn't There. And there was a big falling out in the band about whether we could go that far. Now it sounds a little tame, but the whole song was about sort of like religion and Hare Krishna and just like the onslaught of religion in your everyday life, and if it helped or not. And just sort of waking up and going like, what's going on?
Yeah, the world at that time seemed like nuclear.
Yeah, it seemed like it was coming down the pike, you know. It seemed like a lot of things were going to go wrong, you know.
Thank God it didn't.
Didn't it?
Well, we're not nuclear dust yet, but
Are we not?
But I think we could be pretty soon.
Yeah.
What are your fondest memories of your time with the Babies?
Leaving. No, it was great. The road was great, and the studio was great also, but it was very hard work. It was like 24/7. It was really, you couldn't leave it and go home and do something else. The phone would ring, you'd have to go back to the studio, or there'd be another gig put into the tour. And it was just an extreme time. But we'd made it. I thought it would loosen up the higher we got up the ladder. I thought it would sort of become easier.
But it consumed you more and more.
Yeah, it was like tour album, and we'd like get a couple of weeks off at Christmas. And then it'd be New Year's Eve to play. We never really had any time off.
What can you say you learned from your time with them as a person?
To be free, really. I mean, we were very unself-conscious about writing songs, and we had no real clue about what other people were doing in the music business. We weren't interested. Being English in America, especially in LA, the American scene didn't do much for us at all. We were still in England mentally, so we were just writing in that vein. So we were sort of very self-contained.
So when will the Babies catalog will it ever be re-released on CD?
I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh, really?
Well, it's Christmas, and I think, it was a mess.
Really?
It was a mess then. It was like really, it's unbelievable to me that we survived what we survived, But the music really does, to me, it sounds very current still.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
that's what I love about your lyrics and the music. I mean, everything you've ever done is it's so from the heart. I can, you feel it. You feel your songs. It's not just a matter of listening to it in the car. It's an attitude. It comes across.
Well, it's completely subjective. I mean, I just walk into it and it happens. I don't really stay at home thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow.
That's why you're John Waite.
Well, you can say
natural.
that, but it is natural. And if I knew more about how to control it and how to manipulate the business, I'd probably be a lot further down the line as far as success goes. But I have no real clue about that. What I do just comes to me and I operate on that level. It's like staying sort of in a bubble, but the work is always of a standard, I'm pretty hard on myself. I'm supposed to be hard on other musicians, but I play with really good musicians.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that has also a lot to do with the overall sound.
So after the Babies disband, you record your first solo album with Neil Giraldo, who's known as the guitar player and a songwriter for Pat Benatar.
Right.
And he's pretty much another producer for Pat Benatar also.
Right.
What was that experience like, and what did you learn from working with Neil?
Well, I'd moved to New York at that point, gone solo, and I had a band of New York musicians. I had Ivan Kroll on guitar, which was like Iggy Pop's guitar player.
Oh, okay.
And Frankie the Rocker, and Donny Nossoff, my current bass player. And it was a great band, a very New York band, very European sounding in some ways. And Neil came from California, and I think Neil, instead of it running off into this sort of over-the-top thing it could have become, he kept it in the pop format that the Babies were still in. And I think he salvaged it from being sort of like a real
grungy
explosion.
sound. Yeah.
But it's still a pretty active record. It still sounds like it's recorded in a tin can. It was like the Power Station, which was like the Springsteen studio, the big studio in town. But he did a good job. I like the album.
I love that album.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite
White
records.
Heat is such a pumping song, man.
8th Avenue. Yeah.
That is just excellent. So your second solo album,
Yeah.
this thing explodes.
Yeah.
No breaks.
Yeah.
You have a #1 song
Missing You.
and a million selling record.
Yeah.
How does that change your life?
Well, it was pretty wild because I'd kind of given up. I'd sort of gone back to England and got married at the time. And I was living in the countryside. I'd sort of like decided I was going to be just a local guy, you know, playing the guitar. And some lawyers got me out of my trouble with Chrysalis and brought me back to America, and I made that record, and suddenly it went from like 0 to 60. It was like being in a sports car. But that was great, you know, but it was, I was very unprepared for that level of acceptance. I mean, the Babes had always been able to go out and buy cat food and stuff, you know, we always managed to stay on the street. And suddenly I couldn't do that, you know, I used to get like attacked and, you know, really weird things would happen. I had to get like a bodyguard and stuff. So it went from being like a really sort of everyday fun, loose experience to like really having to sort of take it very seriously.
What's it like having a bodyguard?
You're never lonely.
Mask of Smiles.
Yeah.
You tour on that, and then Rover's Return, and then you have a successful run as a solo artist.
Yeah.
Then you decide, or actually, I believe Epic decides to sign you.
Yeah.
And you signed to Epic, and from what I understand, their intentions were for you to continue to be a solo artist, but you had already decided before they signed you that you wanted to put together a super
Well,
group.
we're doing the deal. I think I might have even signed the record deal. And the A&R guy, I think, wanted to turn me into like something I didn't want to do at all. And I saw it coming, and I thought, well, if I join a band, it's the last thing anyone expects. And it will sort of be something really fresh for people to get into. And I thought it would create a band sound also. It wouldn't be so singer-songwriter, which I'd been for like 8 years. And I thought that would really help to sort of loosen things up. So by and by, however the story goes, I wound up playing with half a Journey and half of the Babies again. And Bad English, you know, that was million-selling, #1 single, that kind of thing. But
and you had a fantastic tour opening for Whitesnake.
yeah, it was interesting.
And how was that?
Yeah, David Coverdale. It was a laugh a minute. It was,
Really?
Yeah.
I bet.
Was, yeah.
So you guys have a lot of hardcore partying on that?
Well, there was some. I mean, it was we'd play every night. When we went on that tour, we'd leave and go off and play a gig that was available. We had to sort of break even, and it's really expensive to tour. So we had to play like almost every night. So we were on the road for almost a year without a break.
And what did you love about being in Bad English?
The fact that I didn't have to be solo. That was a real plus. If it was down to me, I'd have played rhythm guitar. It would have been great to be in a band with someone that could sing, that was also a focus, so I didn't have to be the lead guy. But it was great fun.
Where does the romantic spirit of your songwriting come from?
My mum.
Your mom?
I don't know, I guess. I don't know. Being sort of from the north of England, I guess that's kind of that kind of Celtic sort of Irish heritage thing.
Okay, you're a raving romantic.
Well, I am, yeah.
But how, being in the music business, it can be very hardening on the heart. You can become jaded. How do you keep your heart?
Well, it's like I said before about the music, it's very subjective. I am sort of the person I am, and the rest of the world has to sort of find a way to sort of slot me in. It's not the other way around. I think if it was the other way around, I'd come unglued. I couldn't really find a way to make all that happen. I just happily go about being the person I am, and you know, there are real knocks sometimes. You know, a record doesn't make it, or the record company does something that destroys the work or whatever, but you just get up and make a new record. It's not the end of the world. You know, there's worse things in the world than losing a record.
Well, that's a good attitude to have.
It's the only one to have, really. There's worse things. I mean, look at Rwanda or Northern Ireland or Chechnya or any of that stuff. That's tragedy. Losing a record is just a day in the life, you know, it's nothing.
Cool, you sound well balanced.
Well, how could you not be? Really?
Some people in this industry are not.
Well, I take it very seriously, but like I say, I'm just glad to have made the music I've made. You know?
After Bad English disbands, then you do the solo album Temple Bar.
Yeah, Temple Bar.
And you consider that one of your 3 favorite albums.
Yeah.
Why is this? And what are the other 2?
Well, I'd got to sort of, I'd got back to New York City. I was living in an apartment building. I'd been divorced, and I had a tremendous amount of history behind me. And I'd had like a 2-year period of not working. So I was able to like write songs with a real freshness. And I'd also grown a lot. So I was writing a lot more as a writer, not just as a singer writing songs. There were actual like stories. Like Downtown is like one of the best songs I've written. It's about New York. but there was this sort of availability of that kind of consciousness, and I managed to get it onto a record, which is like once every blue moon you make one of those. You know?
Yeah.
And Temple Bar had that, and the single got to like #2 on the radio. The whole thing was going through the roof, and the record company went bust. So, like I say, you know, at least I got to make that record,
Yeah.
but it's a shame because if you see it in the shops, it's like it's the one.
Well, I heard about the cover of that also. That a lot of people say it was a rip-off of.
It was Beggar's Banquet, yeah, the Rolling Stones. Well, the record company kept sort of making really bad decisions about the cover. At one point, they had like a manhole cover with my name on it, you know, John Waite, Temple Bar. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
That's just what you need.
So I was walking around the village in New York one day, and I rang them up and said, "Look, just make it white, write my name on it, and we'll go with that." And she said, what should it look like? And I just said, Beggar's Banquet, the Stones. So they went out and actually bought Beggar's Banquet and came back. And that was the cover. But hey, you know, at least it's not a manhole cover.
Oh, tell me about this road trip through the USA that inspired the album.
The record company was just folding, and it was very hard to watch that go down. So I jumped in the Jeep and went down 95 and just drove into like the southern states and stayed away for like 3 months.
Now, were you by yourself?
Yeah,
Okay.
they were very friendly. The real America is like out there. When you get outside of the big cities like New York and LA, it's a whole different world.
Really?
Yeah, man. I met people that I really thought were tremendous everyday people. And
Do you have any lasting friendships from?
No, I didn't stay that long. But I made it all the way down to New Orleans, then came back up to the Midwest.
I don't have a purpose.
No, I just went.
I'm just going to go loose and be free.
Yeah.
And what did your significant other say about this?
Call me. It was just like, I just made
Boy,
it. Yeah,
man, what an understanding woman.
Yeah.
That is just
Well, there wasn't much of a
amazing.
choice. I mean, I really had to get out of town. I was kind of like fried with it, you know. But I wrote a whole album. Well, I got the ideas for most of the songs on that trip.
So after Temple Bar comes the greatest hits album called Falling Backwards.
Yes.
John Waite Volume 1.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, I used to work out in New York at the Vertical Club, and the guy that worked at EMI used to work at Epic. And I bumped into him in the gym, and I just said, like, how about doing the greatest hits? And before I knew it, I was in the studio. But it's great. It's got 17 songs, and it's got all the Babies hits.
And that's remastered.
Yeah.
Good.
Took a full day. The Babies, Bad English, and a lot of the Stonewall stuff, too. It's a good record.
So when are we going to be able to get our hands on? Because I heard there's going to be a volume 2 of that.
Well, if I can sort of swing them into the right place, but they're sort of, they're kind of like, you know, in disarray.
And also, I want a copy of Mask of Smiles on CD. And
You and everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's hard to get. I mean, somebody from Australia sent me a copy the other day, and it's like...
So you can't get it on import.
No, they were making it themselves. They were making their own CDs, so it's just hard to get. I mean, it's almost impossible.
You have no say over this. Like, look, release it.
No, they just keep putting the phone down on me. I mean, what can you do? Yeah, it's like, it's
Hey,
gone.
me too.
Yeah, but that's different.
I know. So how did your song When You Were Mine end up on the soundtrack of Melrose Place and the new TV show Charmed?
We were just sort of shopping it around for a soundtrack for a movie, and it wound up on the TV show, so I have no idea how that happens, but it's a good sign, though. It means that people think it's current, you know.
Yeah.
So that was, it's great to see it. It's weird to see it, you know, suddenly, you know, 90210. And there I am singing When You Were Mine. It's great.
Do you have time to watch 90210?
No, but I did that night, though. I tuned it in.
Will you be doing any more acting? Because I know you're on Paper Dolls, was it?
Yeah.
With Morgan Fairchild?
Yes, I was.
Did you like working with her?
Yeah, she's a nice girl. You know? Yeah, I mean, if the right thing came up, like a really good part, I'd jump at it. But the first thing now is to get on the road and sort of get some new tunes out and sort of get back in the studio, I guess.
What would you prefer to play, a criminal or a good guy?
Criminal. With a good streak.
Yeah. Oh, so kind of like Torn.
Torn, man.
Well, I think the reason why they picked it is because your music is very contemporary.
Well, yeah, that is a compliment, though. I mean, you'd hope in the best of all situations that you would stay current, you know. And what I do is actually pretty much rooted in classic sort of root music, but it's always been interpreted as now. It's always like in the first person, so I think it always strikes a chord with people.
John, your music is timeless. So who's your favorite sex symbol?
Dalji Dhaliwal. She reads the ITN World News every night on the TV.
And what does she look like?
She's Indian, but she's British, but she's Indian heritage. Has a beautiful speaking voice, but she's very cute. She's very beautiful. But I get the World News and get to look at Dalji. You know, it's great.
So what's next for John Waite?
What's next? Gigs. I'm playing live. I'm going out on tour, and the band's rehearsing. Shane's in the band, Shane Fontaine. It's a good band. We're doing a gig in Santa Ana, and then we're going to go and play in Nevada. We're just taking all the gigs that come in. We're trying to get back on the road full tilt. But between now and Christmas it'll be a bit thin because it's very late to start touring. But from January on we hope to be on the road like 5 nights a week.
What, now is Shane the only guitar player? Do you have a rhythm guitar player?
No, we got Ricky Bird from Joan Jett's band. He's going to fly in from New York.
And he's going to play rhythm?
Yeah, well, twin lead. We'll see how it works out. He's just going to... We'll put all these guys together and it'll just happen, you know. It usually does, you know, that's the way it works.
It's going to be great to see you live, man.
Well, thanks. It's going to be good to get back out.
What are the hot CDs that John Waite's listening to right now?
Jeez. Well, I listen to a lot of different stuff. Somebody just gave me the Elvis Costello, Burt Bacharach CD.
How is that?
It's great. Once you get into it, it's like Jimmy Webb songs, Burt Bacharach kind of... Obviously, it's Jimmy... Well, it's that 60s style.
I love Burt Bacharach. The stuff
but Elvis is singing his ass off. He's very good.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear you do some songs with Burt Bacharach.
So would I.
Because you have a very romantic...
He once rang me up. He said, like, you know, he wanted me to do one of his songs about 10 years ago, and he rang me up and said, "Hi, John, it's Burt." I went, "Burt who?" And he said, "Burt Bacharach." And I went, like, yeah, you know? And it really was Burt Bacharach. And his wife got on the phone, because I didn't believe. You know? I said, "Look,
Carol Basic.
Yeah, this is Carol, and it really is Burt, and will you sing this song, you know? Pretty wild to actually
Why did you do it?
Well, it wasn't my type of song. But the stuff that he's done in the past and that he's doing now is tremendous. I mean, it's just really...
I'd really like to hear a collaboration because, you know, the two geniuses together, you're the genius of what
he's really something. I mean, Burt really is like right up there. He's like, you know... He's one of the great American songwriters.
You're working on a new album, correct?
Well, I'm writing songs. I'm always writing songs for records and for other people. So I have a tremendous amount of songs that are finished and a lot of songs that I'm still working on. I've always got an album ready to go. Are you
gonna get heavier on the next album? Are you gonna have some more rock songs?
I think I might go back more to the guitar and less keyboard, or conversely, more keyboard and less guitar. I mean, I'd like to, whatever I do should always be like a whole chapter, a new chapter. And I don't want to do things that are predictable, but I do want to stay true to my roots. And the guitar figures very largely in my songwriting. It's just for the last couple of years I've been using the piano because it's more of a descriptive instrument and there's more chords available. Because you can change the bass on the piano. You play a G major and change the bass and it becomes a whole different thing. It's very like the Bacharach songs. It's voicings, you know? And the voicings are more available on the piano. It's a real songwriter's instrument, so I'm trying to sort of pay homage to the piano a lot more than I used to.
Tell me about this webpage that you have.
Well, the fans have a website, johnwaite.com, and it's out of Long Island, but it's worldwide. They've got people on board from Japan, Australia, Canada, Europe, Scotland. It's the wildest thing. There's all these people out there that have sort of been waiting for me to go on the road again.
Yeah.
And they were into the last 2 records, actually. I think I've sort of, although the last 2 records didn't sort of get into the top 10 on the national charts, they did pretty well. They got all over the world, and it kept people in the loop. And it sort of gave rise, I think, to .com, which is great. You know, if you look at it, there's like all the lyrics and pictures from pictures from places that I can't remember even going. I mean, it's like the wildest thing. You know, it's all of my career on a website.
Okay.
Well, I enjoyed it very much.
Man.
If there's one thing you want to ask, you're welcome to ask me anymore. You just got 30 seconds to ask me that major question.
Oh.
Going,
White Lightning. White Lightning.
What about it?
What is that song about?
It's about going to the dentist. And
one little boy in a dentist chair.
Take it, kid.
But I mean, it's about drugs, isn't it?
Well, it's about going to the dentist and getting on gas. You know, being 12 and
loving it.
You go to see the dentist and you wind up in like this sort of twilight world.
John, I really want to just thank you
Eric,
for being on the Blairing Out with Eric Blair show, and I wish you much success in your career.
Well, thanks very much, Eric. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is the Blairing Out with Eric Blair show, signing off.
The Blairing Out Show.